purport to know about newspapers, but slightly on false pretenses. I worked in newspapers for 15 years. I now run a boutique PR consultancy. This is what I think about communications generally, but I certainly feel it applies to anybody who wants to write a newspaper article or a blog or anything digitally. I'd say that my experiences of writing blogs, engaging with social media is good, but also principally in writing for newspapers. And I know that a newspaper experience is a help rather than a hindrance in developing anything digitally, but you've got to remember that, of course, you go to take less space, ideally, much less space to put something out, because people have shorter attention time on a screen. You've got much more freedom to place your stories socially on different sites or different parts of your own site. Of course, you can make much greater use of pictures, and it's all a lot more instantly changeable and fluid rather than a black and white newspaper kicking around somewhere that's very static. So just bear in mind those things, but what I'm going to talk about is newspapers and any lessons you can learn about that. So when you're writing for any sort of content, it's a great way to get out there. It's made, I would say that I'm a PR man, but people read what you write, and often you don't know they're reading it until you get it wrong and they start complaining at you, and then you really find out that people have been reading what you write. But if you get it right, there are all these benefits to have, and building a following is a great thing. So I'd say that these happen to be 5 C's, but anything you write for newspapers or digital should be clear, concise, consistent, coordinated and controlled. Think about what you're writing. When you look at a newspaper, you get news on the front page traditionally, one hopes, unless it's The Independent, for example, which often lead on a sort of a featurey story. News and features are journalistic expressions. You're probably very familiar with them, so excuse me if I'm stating the blindingly obvious. News tends to be fact rather than opinion. It appears at the front of a newspaper rather than the back. Or on the sports page, it'll be on the back page, and the features will tend to be inside. News tends to be tricky because it's apt to create a lot of tension in politics or among lawyers who might be inclined to sue on behalf of their clients if they feel they've been defamed. And features tend to be deeper. A good example might be Nigella Lawson, for example. There was a lot of reporting about her which had to be very sort of well contained and well reported, because that was a report of legal proceedings at a courtroom, and there are a lot of rules about that journalists and editors have to obey. But later on, after it's all over, there's more freedom to write a feature about what this means for celebrity chefs and the rest of it. Maybe not a great example, but I hope you get what I'm saying. And those are things typically that apply to features rather than news. Writing a story, that's an inverted pyramid, self-evidently, and that's what journalists in newsrooms tend to talk about. What you're meant to do when you're writing a news story is to get... People have limited attention spans, and there's a real art to this. In newspapers, you want to do a lot of things. You want to get people interested in the story. First of all, in the headline, which ideally, in most cases, is a small version of what the story actually says. And then in the intro, so-called first and maybe second paragraph as well, you're summarising the story, but trying to interest readers to make them read it right until the end. And there's been lots of analysis about this, but people very seldom read the entire contents of a newspaper, because even in a down-market tabloid, it's likely to contain as many words each day as the average size novel. It's important in writing for a newspaper or digitally to have in mind who your publication is, and more particularly who the reader is. If you're writing for a special audience, as we all tend to do, what's the publication, where does it circulate, is it print or online? Who do you wish to influence, colleagues, investors, regulators, governments, small business? These are all important things. You've got to get published in the right place, as well as thinking about who you're writing for indirectly. In choosing a subject, write what you know about. People who, it becomes clear if you don't know what you're writing about. especially to an audience who does know what you're writing about rather better than you. The other thing to bear in mind is write about something that really turns you on, because good writing tends to be passionate, and if you care about something, you're going to write about it pretty well. And if it's a news story, it should really be new, or it should be a new take on an established or current story. That's really something for journalists working on newspapers, the end one, don't bust a deadline. But it applies to everybody. If you're writing for a commercial organisation or a government department or a client or whatever, it could be great, but it's not going to be much good if nobody reads it, that is if it's late. And it tends to screw up everybody's publishing schedule. So in writing a story, get a brief. If you're writing for somebody guesting on a website, for example, find out what they want you to say. Get them to write it down in an email to you, because what you don't want to do is say entirely the wrong thing and take a lot of time doing it and researching the story and all that involves, and then find that I didn't really want that. Allow time for a writing project. It's great PR. It's going to advance you individually, get you business, or it's going to help the people you're working for. Gather your thoughts and arguments, talk to others. A lot of people, especially a lot of journalists now, use social media. Does anybody know about such and such, and putting a hashtag on it? They get a response. It's a great way to research stories. And other ways as well, just speak to your mates about something. In writing address, the handmaiden's a good story. Who, what, how, when, where and why. Generally, it's really funny, if you look at really upmarket newspapers and think about it, they don't use big words for the sake of it. They write elegantly and well, but they tend to use shorter words. German originating words rather than French ones, for example. And they tend to use subject, verb, object. There's a cliche about certain upmarket newspapers, backward ran the sentences until reeled the mind. So it's important to say what the facts are and keep it simple. And it also maintains interest. People get lost in badly written stories. Be accurate, check your facts, check again. Be fair. You live here, you want to... People, after a couple of drinks, tweet in the middle of the night. Well, they can take that down unless they get in a big amount of trouble. But if you're writing something, as much as don't insult people needlessly, I guess, and avoid waffle. Get to the point. What I've made rather already, I suppose. I don't know, I tend to avoid jargon. A lot of people in business, somebody used an expression ILS the other day, and that apparently means insurance-linked securities. There were a group of people, they're all nodding their heads, and they seemed to know what it was like and know what it meant. I certainly didn't. When you're writing, don't assume anything. You want people to come in to read what you're writing about, whether they're experts or not. Support arguments with evidence, don't just say stuff. I mean, who's saying this? Unless you can cite a source for it or your own feeling about it. This is kind of a repeat of avoiding jargon. Don't be afraid to state the obvious. I mean, I found that, in the days I worked in newspapers and I was thinking about how to construct a story, you finally get it. A lot of the time you do have to link together the facts and state rather obvious things for people who've been out of the country and haven't been following a story closely, for example. You can be too close to a story. You shouldn't assume too much knowledge on the part of your reader. I don't know, if you're writing for a local paper in Northampton and writing for the Chronicle or something like that, obviously you want to write about events and people in Northampton. And that's just not, writing bad things about who's been caught speeding or whatever. You're writing for a population. So bear in mind your audience and what interests them. Keep to a deadline, I've said before. Spelling and punctuation, very, very important. It's great now, you can push Shift F7, I do it all the time, to get, what's the word when one word's like another? Maybe I should have Shift F7. But, also you've got spell check. But a lot of things creep in. My own view, and not everybody agrees with me, that advisors takes an E rather than an O. License is a verb with an S. License. Don't fret. If you're writing for something that's going to be edited, you don't need to check every spit and cough. Editors are going to change it anyway if you work on newspapers anyway. But reread things to check the facts, the spelling, and get things as right as you can. And the story end with a strong conclusion. These are just generalised endpoints. I'd say, if you're writing something for a website, give a brief description of yourself and why you're entitled to comment, qualified to comment on something. Have a picture ready. People want to know who you are. Get into the habit of writing. Not everybody can write. And these days, you hear it in Parliament and everywhere else, school leaders coming out without being able to construct a sentence. I know that pretty much applied to me. It's important and it's great PR personally to write stuff that gets published. And people start finding you very useful. They say, well, you write about this. And, if you're writing about something, the implication is you're an expert on it, obviously. I don't know. Read newspapers and stay informed and ask how you'd write an article. There's a great fund of information in newspapers. I don't know, as an ex-journalist I would say this, and I completely understand the other side of the argument. But, it's a challenge. I remember once I was writing for a daily paper in the Midlands. I wrote something about a commercial enterprise. I got a letter from a London firm of solicitors saying, we're processing a writ in the High Court claiming substantial damages. We are claiming exemplary, that is punitive damages, because your article was obviously motivated by malice. We are also processing a complaint to the Press Complaints Commission. I just nearly wet myself. This is a very, very scary thing. So as much as people think people write any old rubbish in newspapers, newspapers employ lawyers. They've got a sense of mission. They're trying to inform people. They're trying to, uncover corruption and the rest of it. And it's not a very, very easy thing to do at the risk of labouring the point. This has been about me and my firm. Just in passing, I won't spare too long, I advise a handful of stock market quoted companies and also a few private companies, but among them is a corporate finance boutique that raise angel money and family office money for startups and high growth businesses, quite a few of them technology businesses. So the details never, if that sort of thing ever interests you or any PR issue, don't hesitate to get in contact with me. It's a bit more about me. I'm happy to take any questions, in case anybody's got any.
Sorry. Go ahead. One of your comments was about just to start writing, it's easy. So, in what sense do you think it's easy?
Where did I say that? In what context? I can't remember.
It's about 3 slides back. Then, one forward. Get into the habit of writing, it's important and easy. Is it the habit that's easy?
Yes.
Okay.
I think so. Yeah, it's like anything else. I mean, I struggle with WordPress, for example. I wouldn't call that easy. But actually, you make a very good point. It's an easy thing to say it's easy. When I started working on newspapers, there were some pretty awful people on the news desk, and if you get it wrong, you get in a lot of trouble. So it took a few months, but you get into the habit of writing a news story, which is a particular thing to do, and it's happening. So yeah, but if you get into the habit of it, as you expect, I'd like to think I can rattle off a press release now much more quickly than a lot of people because I worked in newspapers. So having done it so long, I find it really but that's because I'm in the habit. Yes?
You mentioned earlier on about being clear about the purpose and clarity of image. Is that a brand question where it's overall you know your brand and then you make that filter out for your tone and how you write? Or is that you have to, on your WordPress site, say, I'm about this site's about this, and this is our purpose?
No, that's a good point. If I understand you correctly, I would say that people will know about your brand through what you say on the website and through what, through other collateral you may have out there. That they would have a good understanding. I guess what I'm saying is if you're writing for, something that you'll hope will win you business, for example, you'll write things that are consistent with your brand, if you're writing them in that context. So that, if you're writing about WordPress and you've often said, I have a particular view about how it should be approached, then you would expect people to see that, played out with and embellished in what you write, I imagine. Unless you're writing about football or something unrelated, I mean, it's clear that you're interested in that too.
I was wondering about the, you mentioned about the legal case that you were worried about. I mean, what happened with that in the end?
It was the longest running complaint to the Press Complaints Commission at the time.
Right.
So it went for a long, long time. They didn't issue a writ. I was able to justify the story. And actually, I worried needlessly. It was just, you know, it was a company, they didn't like what I'd written about it. It was absolutely true, that's what they didn't like about it. They subsequently got in trouble for other things.
Have you got any advice for kind of around writing over a longer period of time rather than, you know, I think of journalism, of course, as the news story. So I guess you've got the food writer and the garden writer in the Times, you know, whatever it is. When I blog, I'm kind of trying to build something over time. So it's each piece is a sort of individual piece, but I want it all to fit together in a way.
You're absolutely right. That's a great approach. You know, if you can do that and gain an audience doing that, that's really good. And that's a trick that newspapers have long played. You know, they did it with cartoons. You know, Peanuts always had a kind of theme going, I guess. They do it with everything. They do it in sports. Columnists do it. Columnists have their bugbears about things. And, you know, that means the star columnists who write, for example, for, I don't know, the Daily Mail or something like that, they make a lot of money because they have this stellar power to attract people, often who agree with them. But, you know, they're looking out for the next thing they're going to say. So it's another reason to write. But it's exactly the same in digital communications. If you've got content, people say, I really like or I hate what that guy's got to say. I must read it next to affirm my own views or make me angry and disagreement. So I hope that's answers.
And number of words as you're putting into these, particularly on the blogs, is there a limit at which they are, forget it, more than 300, 500, 1,000 words or so?
You may know this more than I, but I think that the general rule is write about half as much for a website as you would for an article. And that's because I think all the research says people have relatively short attention spans on the screen as compared to newspapers. And I guess that's right. And the other thing is, you know, newspapers have the benefit of not having links. And if you, in a way, you know, links and sidebars and the rest of it can take you away. So there's always that pressure to deliver a great story, but I would keep it to the point. Yeah, I'd just make it. And by the way, you know, there are books being written about different newspaper styles. I would recommend one in particular, Keith Waterhouse on newspaper styles, a really good book about tabloid journalism. And I wouldn't dismiss tabloid journalism. Tabloids are great, and they're works of art in a way. And the people who put together the daily tabloids are a very interesting bunch of people, and they're good communicators. But all they're doing, you know, for example, The Sun has a very high story count, and they don't run away from foreign stories or the rest of it, but they just concentrate on brevity. You can always edit a story down to length, and of course, the different newspapers have different styles. Sorry.
So just quick, because it's closely linked to the style. A lot of the references are to news, and I'm more writing like features and media copy. So in terms of your structure, like headline, intro, and then second intro, is it sticking to the news principles if you're writing a feature? Is that still the same? And also, my copy's starting to sound like an ad agency because it's so brief. Because I'm going online, so I'm starting to go, but it's moving away from features where it's more indulgent.
Yes.
So what do you recommend for feature writing?
Well, it's a really good, do you know, there's no great answer to that because a feature will tend to reflect the style of the author. There are rules, of course, but, you know, I tended to write a feature a bit like a news story, so I did a sort of a fudge, but I'd make it a bit more discursive and general and have a bit of fun writing about it, and writing the content, and I'd think about it, and I'd ask other people. That's another thing you should do in writing a story. You know, ask, hey, how does this read? You get a lot of great feedback. Merely, part of that's great because it's just not you and you're getting some feedback. But in answer to your question, people can do a standard news intro, but it's a good thing not to. It's good to sort of, in a news story, you're giving a lot away. You're giving everything away in the intro, the first 1 or 2 parts, and the headline. And you're trying to get it out there so people read it before they lose interest. But in a feature, you're writing it for your friends and you want to involve them and inveigle them into the story. So you could have a dropped intro, that is to say, you know, a bit of a hint at what's coming next. So in the first, you know, you kind of getting to the point, but dazzling people with what you know in the first half dozen or so paragraphs. I know it's not a great answer, but you've got a lot more freedom in writing it. And also, you can judge it by what sort of response you get online, I guess.
You did it with your court story. You kept Graham's interest, didn't you? You told us about your court case and we wanted to know about what happened.
Yeah, you're dropping in something for next time. Exactly.
Well, you mentioned feedback. What's your opinion on comments on blogs and articles online in general? When do you think they're helpful? When are they not? We've seen a lot of people, especially the big news agencies, disabling comments now.
Yeah.
Thoughts were?
Do you know, it's a really funny thing, because one thing that the internet has, what the digital world has done is it's identified people who are good journalists who wouldn't have got into newspapers otherwise. They're obviously called bloggers, you know, and the rest of it. Sometimes they're exposed as frauds in a minority of cases because they lack the discipline of working on newspapers, as it were. That's ignoring for a moment the minority of fraudsters working on newspapers, of course. But in answer to your question, I don't know, you go to a Daily Mail typically, you know, that's a huge business now, the Daily Mail. It just sells right throughout the world. I know a lot of people hate it and the rest of it, but God, that's a hell of a business. But you know, if you look, they have thousands of comments now, and they close them off because, I don't know, a lot of the time they do border on bullying. You get a lot of bad language, you get a lot of point scoring and nastiness between the individual commentators. I guess it may be a case of not wanting to associate a journalistic or an editorial brand and values with something like that. That's a guess, I don't really know. But the other thing they'd be careful about is when they say we are not accepting comments on this, it may be because for legal reasons such as the risk of defamation, the risk of contempt of court in an ongoing, especially criminal case, but also possibly in a different set of circumstances, civil action. There may be security implications, for example, national security implications. So, you know, editors have to be aware of all this stuff when they close off the comments, if that's what you're referring to. Yeah.
How do the legal situation vary between journalists and bloggers?
Newspapers are richer, so they're probably going to attract more litigants backed by expensive lawyers. I think that's something to bear in mind. In other words, you know, who cares if some, you know, person in a back room somewhere is writing something? You know, maybe they'll get a warning letter or something like that. But lawyers, but newspapers, actually, I don't like it. I hate the way, you know, it's the price of freedom. You know, lawyers have to spend a lot of money. Sorry, big one. Newspapers have to spend a lot of money on lawyers in this country. I imagine not nearly so much in the States, where they have much stronger freedom because of the US Constitution, much more freedom of information. It's harder which preserves the right to free comment. But you know, here there's kind of a bit of a prejudice against. I don't expect everybody to agree with me. So there's, you know, go down to the Middle Temple. There are a lot of pretty wealthy libel litigation silks down there and solicitors in the West End of London, in the city. And you know, that's a big deal. You know, if you qualify, there's still means qualification. The National Council for the Training of Journalists runs courses. You have to know the basics about law. That covers defamation, identifying children, use of photographs, privacy, a lot of stuff like that. So you know, there's a high degree of awareness. Yes.
I was just wondering about your thoughts on having someone read your work before you publish it. So I thought it's quite common for bloggers that are their own editors, so they don't really have other people.
Yeah, that's right. I really like newspapers because it represents the sum knowledge and experience of a group of people whose judgment and news values I trust. And I think that's why people buy newspapers. And you're right, you may feel very strongly about something, but it has to go past the news desk in the case of a news story, or the features editor in the case of a feature. Then it has to go to sub-editors who would legal it. They've got a very good knowledge and understanding of the law, for example, but also what's the picture to go with this, where does it go on the page, does it go into foreign, sport, features, obituary, you know, all those judgments. And then there's the design people who put a hell of a lot of knowledge and skill into putting out that product. So that's why I'm still a bit of a newspaper fan. You buy it and you know, it's a great thing. And that's something that bloggers don't have. They don't have somebody, a guardian angel, you might say, benignly, looking over their shoulder saying you shouldn't like that. I guess
What was that? I was just saying, this blog website is kind of like one person.
Yeah. Unless they're blogging for
Every role.
Dow Jones or, you know, a news organisation or a television company or something.
Perfect. Thanks very much, Peter.
Oh, what was I
Oh
going to
yeah, you were going to say about WordPress.
Yeah, I need a new website. And it's got to be WordPress, and it's got to equip me to operate it myself subsequently. So I'd be very glad to hear from anybody who would be interested in those projects.
Are you geek or non-geek?
No, I'm not a geek. Good. Definitely not. Much as I'd like to.